Hey everyone, thank you for joining us today and welcome to Journeys to Authorship Wellness session. We want to talk about the path to authorship as being very exciting, but it's not without its challenges. So along the way, many of us face stress, time management issues, and just the balancing act between writing and the rest of our lives. Now, today, Anna Bartkowski and I will share some of our insights and remind ourselves that caring for our well-being is not separate from our writing journey. In fact, it's at the very heart of it. So we encourage you to take what resonates, share your own experiences if you feel comfortable, and hopefully leave today with a few tools that you can begin using right away. Anna and I will introduce ourselves, tell you a little bit more about the Journeys to Authorship anthology book, and give you a few ideas of where you can start your writing journey. I'm a former journalist turned novelist after getting an honorable mention in a mystery writing contest a few years ago. I have 5 titles in my first series called Behind the Mic Mysteries about a young radio reporter, Fade Out, Dead Air, and Bleeder. And they were all radio terminology, but a little more sinister for my mystery series. And then I have a new novel in a brand new series, which launches tomorrow, October 1. Raw Image is book 1 in Behind the Lens mystery thriller series about a television reporter. And I've been both a radio and a television reporter. She covers crime, traumatic incidents, but her passion is to stamp out sex trafficking. We had a question that somebody had asked for us to define what is a story and what is storytelling. And one of my answers originally is the story is basically the premise. Here's what's happening. This is the basic idea about the story. Storytelling is when you tell the beginning, middle, and end. You have the characters, you have settings, you have dialogue, all that type of thing. Anna, here's Anna Bartkowski. She's going to introduce herself and talk a little bit more about her idea about what a story and storytelling is.
Thank you, Laurie. And thank you everyone for joining us. Such a pleasure to be with you today. My whole writing journey started when I was in 3rd grade, and I had to figure out where my family lived before they came to the United States. Well, little did I know what a journey that was going to send me on. I knew that my grandmother spoke German, so I knew we were from Germany. However, they said, ask your parents, be sure to ask them. So I went home, I asked my dad, and he said, well, we are German, but we came via Russia. So this tidbit of information sent me on a journey of research, writing, travel that I can hardly believe I've accomplished, because getting information and records out of Russia during the Cold War is not exactly an easy task. But I wanted to tell their stories. I wanted to know their lives. And that little spark of being Germans from Russia has sent me on a major mission. And I try to encourage others to figure out their own family history, because every family has a history. Every family has a story. Hopefully, you've heard some of the storytelling from some of your ancestors, parents, grandparents, maybe great-grandparents. But I always thought of storytelling as more of an oral tradition, and I think of a story as a written tradition. Both are extremely valuable and inspiring, as I found out when I discovered my family actually lived in Russia, and ultimately they lived there for 200 years. And I had no idea of this growing up in Sheboygan, Wisconsin. So that's my start. I have since, obviously I participated in the journeys. I have written, this is my series. It's called Dead Reckoning. It's the Rosalind Schmidt genealogical mysteries. It's about a modern day genealogist trying to track her family. And guess where they're from? They're Germans from Russia. And I write other books too. I've done nonfiction. I've done a cookbook of family recipes that also shares stories. And I've written books for children, The Adventures of Conrad the Camel, Wanderlust. Oddly enough, you may not believe it when you think of Russia, but my ancestors were farmers who used camels to help them tend to their fields. So it's an unusual history, and I take whatever I do. In fact, I'm in a new anthology that Desert Sleuths has just written, has just compiled, and even that it's about a genealogist who encounters a ghost. So that's called Southwest Danger Awaits, and that just came out this past week. So I'll turn it back to you, Laurie.
Congratulations on that too, Anna.
Thank
So our Journeys to Authorship book is part of, and Anna and I are both part of the group called Always, the Alliance for Literary Writers and Yabbering Scribes. We meet monthly to discuss all kinds of writing topics. Our authors also come from all different genres, and this is something that you might consider putting together from your area. Maybe you want to start a writing group on Zoom or in person, to help each other with your writing. Anna and I also belong to the same mystery critique group. This is a separate group, and we share our pages and our chapters with each other for specific mystery writing feedback, which is just so necessary. So the Journeys to Authorship book is on Amazon. I put the link in the chat as well. And how I got into writing was basically through journalism, and as working as a reporter in radio, television, then newspapers. And then my late husband and I ran a community newspaper for about 13 years before his death. And so I had always written just nonfiction. And I thought, oh, I couldn't possibly write fiction. And then another mystery writer friend of ours, Katrina McPherson, said at a conference one time, we graduated from MSU, make stuff up. And oh my gosh, it is so freeing to be able to make stuff up. Now, I do police procedural type things, so I have to make sure my weapons and all the settings for police are accurate. And I have a lot of police officer friends who help me with that. But the storylines I get to make up, so that's great fun. So Anna, let's talk a little bit about what some of the questions are that we might ask these folks to.
Right. Well, I mentioned, I had this spark when I was in third grade, and my ancestry was my curiosity. But you've joined us today. Wellness, obviously, very important. Writing, I don't know that I could live without writing. So writing is part of my wellness. But I'm wondering, and perhaps you can add this in the chat. I think that might be the best way, but we've got a couple questions. We want to understand where you're coming from joining this. So why do you want to write? And second that with, what do you want to write? These are two critical questions. Why do you want to write? And maybe you just know the why at this point, but and what? There's so many ways of communicating. Laurie's mentioned blogs. There's journals, there's blogs, there are publications. One of my first publications was in the Journal of the American Historical Society of Germans from Russia. So I think it's important. Share with us, why do you want to write and what do you want to write?
And, consider starting with nonfiction, perhaps. I'm sure you've heard this phrase, write what you know. And
Yes.
trust me, it is legitimate. I write what I know as a radio reporter, a former TV reporter, etc. And it's because you have that wealth of knowledge. And in the wellness field that you're in, find those little nuggets that you are an expert on, perhaps, that you know about. And I talked to Arlene earlier, and you have a newsletter. There are blogs on the Contra Costa site that you could write, submit something to her, and for consideration that possibly they can publish that. Just their blogs alone, they had all kinds of topics, from how to create a playlist, again, for your well-being, perhaps, playing with kinetic sand, spreading positivity. These are just great topics. And I'm sure you have a lot of other topics that you could write about. And you would have to find out how many words that they would want. Is it 250 or 1,000 words or whatever? What's the deadline? We all work better on deadlines. When are you going to write this? Allow yourself enough time to write and edit and rewrite, because that's all part of the writing process too. But whether it's the newsletter, a blog, something like that, just for your own company, this might be a great way to get started.
It looks like we've got a few comments, Lori. Let me read them
Great,
aloud.
great.
The first one is, I would like to write stories about people in sickness and the healthcare getting better. I would like to read something like that. I
Mhm.
myself just had an angiogram last week, so I'd like to read that. We serve many underserved population, and I want to tell the stories of our patients. I think that's a fabulous goal.
And it's a personal, in-depth story, perhaps about a person and their experience. And, we all like to find out about our neighbors and what they're doing and how they did it and what happened to them. And I think that's a great, I think you consider kind of a feature, a personal feature story on something like that. And that I think
Yeah.
would be a great idea.
They also continued saying both behavioral health and public health as well, something
Yeah.
that inspires others in our system and the public population that also pays taxes. That's an incredible goal right there. And
True.
I'm not an expert on how to get that, through to pay taxes, but that's absolutely fascinating. I think you've got something there. And I think, some of the things Lori mentioned, like the newsletter that Arlene, that you have, might be an ideal way. I think it would make people much more aware of what's going on.
And would
If
go
you,
out to a wider audience too.
yeah, yeah. And go ahead, Lori. I'm sorry.
No, no, it's fine. It'd just go out to a wider audience, I think, as well, with
Mhm.
the newsletter and the blog that they have. And
That
then
would
Yeah.
somebody
not
else talks
excuse
about
me.
writing poetry. That's great. And she also has two different online writing groups. That's a great way. These online groups are super. One for April's Poetry Month and one in September for flash fiction writing. And flash fiction writing, as she notes is here, is 300 to 500 words, not very long, couple of pages worth. And those groups have daily prompts. I love prompts. It's a great way. Writer's Digest has them. Reedsy.com, reedsy.com has great prompts on all types of
Right.
things. And you can go in there and it just sparks an idea for you to write with.
Right. That's a great way to do it. Next comment is, I have a family heritage story I would love to share.
It's right
Well,
up your alley,
isn't
Anna.
that the story of my life and writing? I understand that. And I had a real sense of urgency when I started doing mine because, the first thing I did, I don't know if I mentioned, was a cookbook with my mother. And I knew my mother was on, it wasn't going to last forever. And she's been gone now a number of years. But the talking to the people, the research, and then if you can, you probably have a strong oral tradition. If you ever find anything written by an ancestor, oh my goodness, I had that experience once. I hope you find, don't let people, if anyone passes, go to their house, search it from head to foot. I mean, attic to basement, whatever you've got. There are so many stories that go with one person, and I think it's fab. I think the family heritage story just resonates obviously with me.
Well, and
Um,
Anna, I have my grandmother's diaries from when
ah,
she was 13 years old until about 3 months before she died at 97. And I am just going through and reading them. I'm about up to 1939 right now. And
oh,
just trying to absorb everything to number one, to see, is there a story there? She was a
yes,
farmer's wife, raised a couple of kids. I'm not sure if there's a story, but it may just be a family story, and that's fine too. But it's been fun to read and find out when she was young, going to her friends' houses and playing hand and foot and different things like that. So look for those diaries, look for that writing at your grandparents' place for sure.
absolutely. And one thing I knew I had these, but I hadn't done anything with them. But when I'd say from about 1975 till about the year 2000, my mother wrote a weekly letter to me. Did I
Oh,
save them all? Of course not, but I have a lot. And I'm looking at those now and I'm thinking, so use the tools to help build that heritage, use the photos. And if you're like me, you may well find, I mean, what can you put it, if you're thinking a book or you're thinking a blog or whatever you're thinking, um, you will probably have more than one story because there are some people I know, oh, I wrote my family book and it's all here and it's done and it's like 4 million pages and it's hard to read. I recommend putting it in blocks. Find the story here, find the crux of it here. A lot of our ancestors, maybe our parents or grandparents lived through World War I and World War II. That in itself is one story. So consider how you do it, and I wish you the best on that.
Sure.
I guess the other question to think about, and throw this in the chat if you can, but what is your goal with doing this? Sometimes with the family heritage stuff, the goal is just for yourself and or maybe your descendants, or maybe your extended family. Maybe you want to be a best-selling author with one of the top 3 publishing houses in the country. Or like me, I'm an indie author. I don't have the patience to query an agent and do all that kind of stuff, but I love getting my books out there. So what's your goal? Or is it just your own peace of mind, getting it down on paper? And all of these goals are equally valid, let me assure you. So let us know your thoughts on that in the chat.
And somebody else, Linda, also mentioned talking about family letters that you were just mentioning too. And
Yes,
I found a
yes.
bunch of my love letters from my parents to each other too recently.
Oh,
And I need to start going through those as well. But yes, those
oh,
family letters, precious,
yes,
precious things, and a great way to start to come up with a story. Absolutely.
yes. And like in my book, Dead Reckoning, um, it's not a story about me, but it's a story of a young woman. She is more in her 30s doing her genealogy. And everything I've learned in my research through the years, it gets piled in there, whether it's in this book or the next book or the next one. Um, but you've been doing this research your whole life. So don't, and does that mean I stopped doing research? No, because there's certain particular things you come across and you're like, I need to get more in depth on this. I see a question. What do you mean by indie publishing? By indie publishing, I mean, I'm a self-published author. I have my
Independent.
own independent.
Indie is short for independent. Right.
Yes. And I do my I do pretty much everything. I create my covers. I I do have some editing. I do have obviously a great deal of critique support. I have a support network of readers who help. But as opposed to a publisher who you would likely need an agent, you'd have to get an agent who would then query the publishing houses and try. The good thing about publishing houses, if you do get a deal, you get upfront payment. If you're an indie author, and you do get support from the publishing house with editing and all of that. As an indie author or an independent author, you do it all yourself. You might hire out certain aspects where you're not as proficient, but you can do your own publishing. You can use Amazon. We use, for our Journeys book, we actually had some of these printed by a local printer also. So there's many avenues if you're choosing to do, a book, a formal book. But writing doesn't have to be a formal book.
And it used to be, you've heard about the vanity press from many, many years ago, and it's not that anymore. Independent publishing is a legitimate way to publish your books, get it out there rather than, like Anna said, waiting forever to find an agent and all that. And it's much more legitimate. And a lot of big name authors are, in fact, are taking their titles back and
Yes,
self-publishing as well. So it's definitely something that's easy to do. Kindle Direct Publishing, KDP, is a great way to get started on that, to do that yourself.
yes, yes. It's very
Right.
doable. All
Yeah.
of
So
my books, well, this was done by Always, but all of my books are independently published, except I did work with a historical society on this one. So I've had some of that experience, but that's a very niche product. So
and my first series was actually published by a small independent publisher. And then she and her husband retired. So all those titles reverted back to me. So I had to redo covers and introduction pages and all that type of stuff. So now I'm self-publishing all of mine as well, which is great. I like the control over that too.
Laurie, I think we're
And
at
on
about
time, Arlene.
12:25. Maybe we open it for questions.
Yeah. Does
Yeah,
anybody
we
have
have
any
5 more
questions?
minutes. And
Okay.
again, everyone, what Laurie and Anna was referring to was earlier on how you can start writing and perhaps publishing it initially is through our wellness tips. That's a wellness newsletter that we release every 2 weeks or twice a month. So please feel free to send your creative writing to cchswellness@cchealth.org.
It's a great place to start. And I think Arlene, again, you need to find out what the specs are, what the arrangement, how many words, all that type of thing. But I think it's a great place for all of you to start. And we have a little one sheet that I think Arlene is going to send out with more of these websites and a little more information about us as well. So I'm sure she'll send that out to everybody too. Any other questions that you guys have?
I have a question, Laurie and Anna. What really prompted you to write in terms of, yes, I can do it? You know, that, yeah, maybe I'm not qualified or maybe I need, extra training or something. How did you know that, yes, you can do it?
Anna, go ahead.
Well, Laurie is the real journalist. I did study journalism, but I ended up in advertising. So I've always felt this desire to write. And I have, I try to keep up with the craft with reading current books. I didn't start writing mystery books. I started writing a cookbook to document the recipes that I couldn't remember how to cook anymore. And then I'm like, I can do more. And that just gave me the strength, persistence. I love to learn. So it was natural for me to reach out to groups such as, the Sisters in Crime group, critique group, different, you kind of find a tribe and a network that, it's not to say that you don't have doubts, because sometimes you look at that page and you're like, oh my gosh, that's really blank. And you don't know what to do next. That happens to everybody. But I've kind of built a tribe around me between Laurie and these groups and even my daughters in helping me to look at what I've written. Does this make sense? Would someone be interested in reading this? So it just takes perseverance. I think finding your tribe is the key.
That's a great idea. And I got started, I don't know, I found stories that I wrote in 6th grade. And I had a great English teacher in 8th grade. And I think she really instilled the love of writing. And I was very fortunate to have a career in writing, like I say, news primarily. But I've written documentaries and magazines and murder mystery plays and just all kinds of whatever people would pay me to write. I'll try it. So I've had a fun career in that. And it was just once you do one and you see it published or you get that first book, it's like, oh my gosh, the thrill is so fun to have that. So then you get the bug, right?
Yeah. It is addictive. Laurie's absolutely right. It is addictive. And I mean, I'm fortunate now that I'm retired from the job where I made a living, that I can devote my time to it. I know you don't all have that same amount of time, but if you take 15 minutes, 20 minutes a day, just thinking about it, maybe jotting some things down, I encourage you start now. Because if you fall in love with it, as Laurie and I have, you're going to want to do it the rest of your life. It's part of my wellness. It really is.
Yeah, absolutely. And Arlene, could you put that link to, I see you've got the email there. Put the link to the actual site with your blogs and newsletters. Marla had asked everybody, what do you recommend for starters on what topics to delve into? I think if you look at the past blogs and the past newsletter ideas that have already been there, it's going to spark ideas for you. And you'll say, oh, I could write something like that, only here's my spin on it. Or, oh my gosh, that brings up this other idea. Something you do every day, perhaps in your job, in your life, with your family. As somebody mentioned earlier, behavioral health, such in the news right now. And that information is so needed. If that's something that you're an expert in or want to find out more about. I was a general assignment reporter, so I did a different story about something every single day and learned so much. I was not an expert in education or crime or whatever, but by doing those stories, asking the questions, who, what, where, when, why, and how, don't forget those, and you'll find your story will write itself if you get all those questions answered. So find what you like to write, what you are interested in writing for starters, and I think that'll go far.
I also think to add to that, Laurie, write what you want to read.
Yes.
There's other people out there that will want to read it too.
Right. Good point. Good point. And Anna, I don't know about you, but I read mostly mystery, thriller, suspense stories. That's just what I like to read, and so I write them too. Yeah.
Yeah. And some historical fiction.
Right.
I love that too.
Right. Good. Good. Who else has a question? Anybody else? We hope that this will help spur you on and maybe get you excited about trying. And again, writing comes with rewriting and editing and redoing, and don't worry about that. That's all part of the process. But we do hope that you'll pick something and try it and see how it goes and submit it to Arlene. And she may come back and say, well, could you do this kind of a subject, or could you do this angle? And then you rewrite it to that. And hopefully if you get published, you'll enjoy that and be able to move on from there too.
Absolutely. And if people have questions after the fact, I'm sure Laurie and I would be very happy to have you reach out to us, and we'll gladly give you an answer.
Yeah. So thank you so much, Laurie and Anna, for gracing us with your presence, your expertise, and your experience in book writing and storytelling. Before we end this, can you share with us how many words did your first book contain? Do you remember? So that we are not overwhelmed here.
How many words, total words in our book? Is that what you're asking about?
Yes, well, the first one.
This is, I kind of consider this my first book because it's my first fiction novel. And this is right around 76,000 words. I don't know for journeys, then I've got some children's books and cookbooks, and I don't know that that's really comparable to what you're asking.
But 75,000 words is pretty average for a fiction novel, I think. 75 to 100,000, that's getting a little large. 75 to 85,000 is pretty typical. My very first story, I wrote a novella, which is usually 40,000 words or under, because I wanted to see, I've got 3 storylines in my Behind the Mic mysteries. I wanted to see if they held together. And when I felt that they did, that's when I wrote my first novel, but it was only about, I think it was 55,000 words. I write a lot of meat and potatoes, nuts and bolts. Tell the facts, ma'am. And my publisher was called Short on Time Books. She was fine because a lot of people want to get in, read it, and move on to the next story. So she was fine with a shorter length. Then my other ones have been in the 65 to 75,000 range too. So I hope that helps.
Yes. So thank you so much again, Laurie and Anna, and we hope to meet you again in the future.
We're welcome to come back. Please have us back at any time. We'd be happy to come back and share additional information. We could go on forever, as Anna talked about earlier. So,
and where do we find your books?
On Amazon.
On Amazon, or I've put our URLs in, put our websites in the chat, and you can go there and you'll find links to get to Amazon, and then, or you can just search for our names, but go to their websites. That's the easiest way to find the links to go to the Amazon. Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. There's one last minute question.
Sure. Oh yeah.
Where do we go to take a storytelling class online? Any ideas?
What about your community college in your area? Check with your community college. They usually have it's usually under creative writing. That's usually kind of the main header. And then see if they have either, it may be fiction, it may be nonfiction, it may be, again, storytelling. But I think a community college or a local college also would be another good place. Anna, any other ideas?
Well, there are some groups, and this might appeal more to the people with family history, but there's some historical societies that actually, I know that the society, I'm a big part of the American Historical Society of Germans from Russia. They have a writers group where they've done classes and then they've done sharing, critiquing. But I think Laurie's is probably easier. And I think if you have a particular topic, you may want to Google that topic and storytelling class.
Yeah.
And see if you can find something that might be specifically geared to you.
Mm-hmm. And ask your friends if they've taken, a class somewhere, because they may be able to recommend one. A friend of mine who's a published author teaches writing classes regularly. And I just know this because I subscribe to her newsletter. So you might go on Facebook too and go to some writing groups there, or just do a Google search about local writing classes perhaps in your area.